Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle, and today I'm doing a special request in my shop. It was a request to show how to service a 209 level wind. Well, I don't have a 209 level wind, I have a 210. The difference between the 209 and the 210 is in the main gear, and it's also in the bushings versus bearings. So the 210 is known as a MAG 210. It has a little magnetic feature that helps with casting and backlash, or anti-backlash. It also has a bearing on each side as opposed to a bushing, and it has a larger gear. It has the Jigmaster 309 level wind gearing as opposed to the Long Beach gearing. But other than that, it's essentially the same. The take apart is pretty much identical. The reassembly, of course, would be the same as well, and the drag service and the lubrication points nearly identical. So I figured I would go work on this one today to show how to go do the basic maintenance and service for this reel. And in order to do that, we're going to get started by taking off the drive side assembly points. You remove the set screw for the handle nut, then the handle nut follows. And then the handle, I like to back off the handle rather than trying to rock it off. I use the star nut from the drag, and counterclockwise, that'll pop your handle, and then your star nut comes off, and then the ferrule. So it's a good time to tell you, if you don't work on reels and you're a little bit nervous about it, you saw I just took off several pieces quickly. What I would do in that situation is I would recommend that you take pictures along the way, so that you remember the sequence that you took them off and how you took them off, which parts belong where. This screw seems to be stuck. I'm going to use pliers with a little bit of a scrubby so I don't mar the chrome on that particular cross post. If I went on and didn't have a firm grip on that, you would see scarring. So there's no sense doing that. If you could take a little bit of prevention ahead of time. When I get a screw that's stuck like that, it usually means that the reel hasn't been serviced in a while. So I like to make sure that as I'm doing this, it's done properly. So okay, so you're also noticing that I'm putting all of those pieces and parts into a little parts bucket. In this case, it's the bottom of a milk jug, so that I know where to find them when I go to reassemble. This reel, the only problem with this reel is in reassembly. It's somewhat of a pain in the neck to work with this shield. Typically I don't do well with it. We'll see how it goes during the video. But we'll show you how to go take that apart, lubricate that, and then reassemble it. So this one, a little difference on the 209, you don't have this broader base here. That would be because there's no mag feature in there. The mag feature is intended to control the spool so that you don't get the anti-reverse backlash. You'll also notice that the screws I just took out there are longer in this reel. Actually on the 209 they're going to be shorter. Okay, so everything kind of falls apart when you do that. You pull out the side plates, your shield comes off, your worm gear and pawl assembly comes off, and you get the non-drive side. So this is a bearing. I like to make sure that the bearing turns, so I use a Phillips head screwdriver and just rotate it to make sure it's turning. I check at this point in time, I check to make sure that all of the teeth on this transition gear are in place, and these are. And then the gear there is actually driven by the worm, and you can see how that operates. It goes from metal to a plastic gear, and then this side over here is actually the back of the spool, and that's what drives your level wind assembly. So all those teeth are in place. These gears are meshing fine. So all I'm going to do in this case is I'm going to oil that bearing. So I oil bearings and I use blue grease on moving parts. So I'm just going to grab my blue grease, which is, in this case, it's a Penn Precision Reel Grease. I'm just going to put a little bit on the teeth of that plastic gear. You don't have to get all of them. They will work themselves. It will work itself in over time into that other gear there. Okay, so that's this side's assembly. The plate is clean. If it needed to be cleaned up a little bit more, you could take a cotton swab and you can work your way through there. In this case, we're in good condition. This is a clean assembly. So we'll take that. We'll just check this side. Put a little bit of blue grease on that one drive gear there. The gear behind it is actually the clicker assembly. And we'll just go reinstall that spool. And while I have that spool out, I'm going to put a little bit of grease on that spool shaft, which is going to go into the spool gear on the other side of this. All right, so that part is done. Let's turn our attention to that pawl gear. The worm gear seems to be running fine. It seems to be operating properly. Here's how you oil the pawl. You remove that screw. That screw is a cap that holds a pawl in it. The pawl is a cylindrical piece of metal. It has a fork on it. You can see it seated in the cap. I'll take it out. That's the pawl, and you need to make sure that the forks on those are equal in size. You install that back into the cap, and then you put a drop of grease on that so that it can rotate freely in that cap. Once you did that, you're going to reinstall back into the carrier assembly. Again, it's a screw, and you have to be a little bit careful here. That's why. The fork rides through. Just want to make sure I have it on the right side. I didn't. The fork rides through on that, and then it seats itself in that cross hatching on the gear itself. So if you don't screw this in properly, what will happen is the pawl won't sit correctly, and the gear won't function the way it's intended. So you just gotta kind of, in a series of iterations there, just kind of keep playing with it until you feel that it's seated. What you're doing really is you're just kind of causing little bits of rotation until the fork, there you go, until that fork grabs the channel that it rides in. So we're good on that assembly. We're going to turn our attention to the main gearing then. To get to the main gearing, you got to remove this metal side plate, the trim ring. It's held on by 4 screws. You'll notice that I have a protective glove on. I don't like to get all of the real oils and that on my hand. And you never know what they've been oiled with. You never know what kind of contaminations are in these reels. So it's a dollar store kind of an item. It's a plastic latex glove. I would recommend that you use them, but that's your choice, right? Okay, so I've backed off the 4 screws. That's dropped out the assembly. In this case, you can see the assembly is almost like a jig master. It has the screw on the dog. So this one is not one where it comes off the side. If you're working on a 209, the anti-reverse dog would be on the side. Right, that's clean. I don't need to do anything there. These drags look like they're in pretty good condition as well. So your drag stack goes main gear, fabric washer, circular metal washer, fabric washer, eared washer always goes in the middle. Last, the fabric washers, cap, top one, and then cap, and these are all good and they're all lubricated. I really don't need to do anything. If I needed to lubricate those drags at this point, I could use a drag grease. This happens to be Cal's Universal Real Drag Grease. There are others out there on the marketplace, but I've found success with Cal's, and I continue to use that. Reinstalling then, it's the main gear, fabric, first of the round washers, second fabric. The eared washer always goes in the middle, and it sits in those channel indentations in the main gear. Last of the fabric washers, top metal round gear, cap. This one's done. If we go up top then, you lubricate and check out the free spool assembly. You do that first by removing the transition collar on the main. There's a little hook that goes over the idler cam that just came out. Take off the collar. The spool gear came out earlier. And then we have access to that back bearing. Now that one looks clean, so all I'm going to do is drop some oil on that one. Again, I oil bearings. This looks clean as well. I'm going to just put a little bit of blue grease on the collar that holds the spool gear. Spool gear rides on those two springs. In this case, the screws did not come out with them. That's okay. So we push that in. We take the transition piece and put that back over the free spool idler cam there. And then we're ready to reinstall. So we have the top part we press down on. Since the anti-reverse on this one is on the bridge, all we have to do is straighten that in. If you were working with the 209, you would have to do a half turn on this one. And then on the 209, you would have to press the anti-reverse dog onto the post there, put that little spring into the indentation, and then rotate the rest of this around. But this is like a jig master where it just presses in place. So with that, I'm going to tighten one of the top screws to set it. Then I'm going to come over, and there's two different screws. There's a partially threaded screw that belongs up top. There's a fully threaded screw which belongs on the bottom. The partially threaded screws have a smooth surface on it so that those springs can ride accordingly without snagging on the ridges of that screw. All right, so and then I do an X pattern. I do the tightening up top, and opposite below, and then up top and opposite below. Sort of like what you would do on an automobile lug pattern. All right, so that's complete. I'm going to put that trim ring back on. I'm going to put one more piece of lubrication, a little bit of blue grease on the that transition piece for the free spool. And then we're going to reinstall the metal cap ring. Just lining up the holes properly, and then we can reinstall the rest of the pieces as we put the reel back together. So this is the tricky part now. It's getting this shield on. It's always a problem, and if you try to get the shield on with this seated, it'll drive you nuts. So what I like to do is I like to take the side plate and get it on the onto the spool shaft, and then on this, there's two lengths of the sides. One's a long and one's a short. The shorter one belongs to the front of the reel, and it sits in the two pinholes on the side plate. And then it's just a matter of playing with it a little bit to get those into the pinholes. But it's not the easiest thing in the world, as you can tell. I just dropped it once. I'll probably drop it 3 more times before we're done here. But once you, there we go. So, and then, oops, we didn't get that side in. A little bit of an annoyance, but you just have to be patient and work yourself with it. Okay, once you get it in, then hold that pressure on your hand and put one of the side screws into the top crossbar. The top crossbar is the closest to that assembly, and that'll actually act as a clamp once you are able to put that in. Then you work your way down. You grab another one of those screws and you put it in that bottom cross part there. And you notice we haven't put that the level wind assembly in yet. And if you were to try to put that in while you were doing all this other balancing here, it could take an eternity. It's just not an easy thing to do. So don't put it in. Get the side plate secured first. And this is where that parts bucket comes in handy. You know where all of your pieces and parts are ahead of time, so you don't get stuck with any of the trying to figure it all out in the middle of trying to hold everything here with your hands as a clamp and so on. And again, this is the same procedure whether it's a 209 or a 210. And then 2 bottom screws go into the reel seat to hold this reel in place. And then we'll put that level wind assembly in. So the level wind assembly sits, it has a square drive side on it that goes onto that metal that we were showing you earlier, and it has a metal one that sits into a cap, and here's your cap. Your cap is in the side plate, so you want to remove that at this point. And then what you'll do is you'll take the level wind assembly and put it through that hole so that you can line it up. Sit the prong of the line guide in that channel groove, and then press over to the other side. So I've got this now and I'm putting pressure here. And turn the spool until you hear it click. Then you know that you're properly seated in that other side. Then you can come back in with this cup that holds the non-working side into the side plate. So once you do that, you can you'll find it's a pretty easy way to reset this. And then just screw that back in all the way. If you're finding that it's not seating, just play around with it a little bit. It will eventually seat. And then all you have to do is rotate the spool, and that'll make you tell you that your mechanism is working properly. So back out to just tighten up the rest of this reel. There's a ferrule that goes on for your drag. Again, if you've taken pictures along the way, you've known this. If you've worked on these reels, that's kind of the way we back it off. I'm going to put the star drag nut on. I'm holding this down with a Phillips head screwdriver so I don't damage the internal threads, but it gives me enough to hold that. I'm going to go put the handle back on. Handle nut. And then the last piece would be that set screw just to hold the handle nut in place. So you align the ridges of the handle nut with the hole for that set screw. And you'll notice I'm using an aftermarket handle wrench here. If you're working on these a lot, they're available through pennparts.com. Many of you may have the handle wrench that comes along with the reel, and that's fine if you're not working on a lot of reels. That's okay. The aftermarket one gives you a little bit more leverage. It's a little bit longer, it's a little bit thicker, so that it doesn't slide off that handle nut quite as much. And it also has the nut diameter for the 4 O's and the 6 O's on the other side of that wrench. So I find this very convenient. It's about $15. It's available on pennparts.com. Okay, so that's the servicing. I got the clicker on there. We're hearing the mag at the moment, and we're in good shape. So that's how you do it. That's how you work on a Penn 209 or a 210. I think I've pointed out the differences. The difference between the two reels is in the drag stack size. It's 2 smaller screws here, and the anti-reverse dog is not attached to the bridge. It's attached to the screw on the side plate here that you, on the bridge plate here that you need to do that partial rotation on. If you want to see how to do the partial rotation, take a look at my video on the Penn Long Beach 60 rebuild, and it'll show you exactly how that works. So I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, please like it. If you want to see more of these, please subscribe to my channel, as I'm constantly bringing these reels that I'm servicing in my shop to YouTube. I've been doing this for over 20 years now. I'm sharing my experience so that others can learn how to do this. And I hope that if you have one of these reels that you go ahead and get that service so it's productive for the coming season. Again, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. Thank you for watching.